Hi, everyone. Did everyone have a good lunch? Yes, yes. Feeling a little bit tired after lunch? No? Energized? Ready to network even more? I know we've been networking for a day and a half already, but without any further ado, since we're at time, I want to welcome everyone to our All in a Day's network session. My name's Jonathan, or JP, and
Hey, I'm Phil.
And as we jump into things here, I'm just going to go through a little bit of a summary of what we're going to be walking through. So, first off, we'll talk a little bit about us so you can know who's speaking in front of you. After that, we'll talk about the foundation of networking. Either if you're a experienced networker or you're a novice in networking, it's all stuff. Some of it might be reminders, but it's all stuff that can be regularly used. Then we're going to go through the groundwork of networking. And at that point, I'm going to pass it off to Phil to go through the trust equation and the ask. Then we're going to do a wrap up at the end. So once we do a wrap up, we'll go over some takeaways and there'll be a Q&A period. So if you have any questions then, either if you're in person or if you're online, we can go through those questions. Or if there's not time at that point, we can also go through them after the fact. So to break the ice a little bit, if you can visually see the background, we're going to talk a bit about us. Sorry in advance if I have any dad jokes. They might come out, especially if I'm slightly nervous at times. So I'm Jonathan, or JP. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at Ubisoft Toronto. At Ubisoft Toronto, I am both a talent acquisition specialist, and that's focused in any sort of job family. So that can be in production roles that are for building games, or in support roles where you would be in a typical sort of business function like HR, comms, those types of areas. I also am the co-lead for our local chapter of our 2S LGBTQ plus ERG, or Employee Resource Group. And to give you a little bit more about myself, I have a Bachelor in Fine Arts in New Media. And then after I studied that, I realized it wasn't my calling, and I transitioned into HR, where I can still apply my knowledge from there, but I'm focused more on that people connection side in this industry. And I'm going to pass it over to Phil.
Cool. Hey, everyone. I'm Phil Gazaleh. Actually, my middle name's Joseph. So if you're JP, I'm PJ, which is great.
Yeah.
I am an associate partner with McKinsey and Company. Probably not the first company you think of when you think tech, but we work with mostly large institutions, and I'm part of the data transformation practice. So I spend quite a bit of my time working with what I consider to be legacy institutions, figuring out just what the heck can they do with their data, all the value they can get out of it, all the cool insights they can glean, but also answering some of the ethical questions that come up when you're doing advanced analytics and some machine learning driven decisions. Anyway, all that to say that I'm super excited to be here and share some of my insights with you. My career's kind of taken a few twists and turns. And many times I've had to lean on my network of friends and colleagues and former colleagues and people I've met in the queer community to help me along my way. And I'm just looking forward to sharing some of those trials and tribulations with you. My background, as you can see, started in econ at Ottawa U, did an MBA and a global affairs degree. So again, not your traditional attendee of a tech conference, I'd say, but since most of my clients are chief data officers, I feel very welcome in your company.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Phil.
Cheers.
And talking a little bit about our connection, because of course, Phil and I actually know each other through our network, but we don't work in the same industry. And both of us used to volunteer with an organization that you might have heard throughout this day. I know there's a couple people in the room that are from this organization. It used to be called Out on Bay Street, which is now the name of their conference that they have. And now their name is called Start Proud. When I was there, I started off as a graphic designer, and then I moved into becoming the chair of Toronto events. And that is when we had monthly networking socials that could connect to us LGBTQ plus students with folks that are in business, tech, and law. So we did our monthly socials, and I would plan panel discussions with subject matter experts that would be working in those industries. And Phil?
Yeah, and I ran our awards portfolio. So it included scholarships for students, but it also included recognition of senior executives and folks who are showing leadership earlier in their career in something what we call the Leaders to Be Proud of Awards. And after that, I was elevated to a board role and served for many years there as well. Yeah.
Thanks. So now going on to the foundation of networking. So I'm going to put it out there. We know networking sometimes can be awkward. Sometimes it can feel necessary. We've been at a conference for over a day and a half, and there can be different types of elements for networking. So with this foundation, I'm just as a quick reminder of what networking is that it's the cultivation of productive relationships for employment or business. That's how Merriam-Webster defines it, but we know that networking can go far beyond this. So talking a little bit about the basis of networking. So networking isn't just for business. It can be personal relationships that you're having. So that could be friends and family, classmates, instructors that you've been in. It can be both in person and virtual, as we've been in a hybrid environment for the past day and a half with this conference. It can be already integrated or newly found. So already integrated might be your first degree connections. Newly found would be those second or third degree connections. So who your network knows, and then going further out for degrees of connection. It's also for both novice and experienced networkers. So you might be new to networking, you might not have been exposed to as many formal networking opportunities, or you might have been exposed to them for years or many instances. And just never forget the foundation and the elements that come in with networking, because you want to be able to leverage them when you need them, and you want to be able to help other people when they're trying to network as well. So the places to network, first and foremost, you're going to want to try to activate your first degree connections. So that can be talking to people that you're in your network, not letting any of those connections go cold. So actively touching base with them. There may not be a rhyme or reason of why you're talking to them, but just keeping that connection warm and wanting to be in the know that when you need a networking opportunity, you can activate this first degree. You can be at events, so like how we're at a conference today. It can be at more less formal events, so that could be socials. It could be you get together someone's having because you don't know who's going to be there and who would be a part of that social circle or network. It can be through apps. So LinkedIn, as we all know, is a major app in this. Meetups, Zing is another app, or there can be apps that we're using in our personal life that have business enablement sides to it. So even Bumble has a business enablement side to it. Not the first choice when you're maybe thinking of using Bumble, but it's in an option there that you can use for it. And then just having an online presence. So beyond your networking apps, you might want to be on sites like ArtStation, you want to be on Behance, you want to be on Discord, because that's when you can connect with your different communities. Or if people are using quote unquote less traditional ways to reach out to you, like more less mainstream like LinkedIn, they might be looking on those areas to see what your experience is and what you can showcase. And just thinking in everyday life that there's networking. So as I said, it can be at house parties, it can be meeting a neighbor that you're at sort of a block party with, or when you're grabbing coffee at your local coffee shop. Any of those instances can end up being networking opportunities. So what goes into the groundwork of networking is that there's a few different key areas. I'm going to offer you 6 areas to always keep top of mind when you are networking or when you want to leverage your network. Is to be prepared, be genuine, be focused, mindful, memorable, and nurturing. So with these 6, I'm going to walk through all 6 of these with you so that we can break those down and unpack them a little bit more. So first and foremost, for being prepared, is that networking can happen at any time, right? You could be at a conference like we are here today, and you're going to want to try to network. You might want to be making business connections. You might be wanting to build your entrepreneurship brand and get the word out there, or you might be trying to find a role. If you're in a formal setting, you're going to want to research the attendees or the organizations that are there so that you can build meaningful conversations based off of your knowledge that you've had. And you're going to want to read up on relevant media. So that could be with articles. We've heard a couple people bring up the news about Twitter over the past day and a half. So you just want to sort of be in the know so that you can talk about those relevant topics to specific folks. And an example that I have from my own experience is I looked at sort of emerging trends in apps when 10,000 Coffees had come out. I saw it when it was in an article. I ended up immediately going on this application, which it used to be for connecting junior people or people that were job seekers with either well-known or reputable folks that are working in specific industries. When I put my hand up to be a part of this and actively was engaged on this application, I got to do a roundtable with George Stroumboulopoulos, which was really interesting at an early career moment, being able to talk to someone in an industry that I was interested in. And now, as it happens, I'm working in entertainment. Um, Next, for being quote unquote ready to rumble in any sort of a networking instance, is that you're going to want to go in with the proper mindset. So sometimes that might be amping yourself up. If you've had a hard day, a hard week, you might not feel like you're ready to network in a specific moment, but see if you can get into that mindset so that you can make the most of it. Here for networking, at times, I don't want to think that I don't want to not act and then regret not acting later. So try to think in the moment and what you can do, and go into it with a growth mindset. So see if you're not going with a specific outcome of networking, what can you learn from when you're talking to this person, what they're a subject matter expert in, and it's something that you can have as a takeaway. I'm going to also say that practice makes comfortable. No one's perfect. You're never going to have the same delivery or same verbiage that you're using, either if you have rhetoric or not when you're bringing it up. But consistency is key. So that might be how you want to distill your elevator pitch that you have, or how it's semi-structured, because you might want to pitch it in one way to one type of profile and then another way when you're pitching to a different type of profile. And then you're also going to want to prep your profile. So as I said, that there's different avenues. Make sure that your profiles are all up to date. If you're in a formal setting like this, and say you're in art, you might want to have a tablet on hand, because then you can show what your portfolio is. I have people regularly showing me what their reels are, and asking for what we're looking for in recruitment. And then that's an easy way that we can talk about their style or their process that they are doing for working in that type of function. And then the next portion is saving your LinkedIn QR code. So some of you might have seen this today. It might be news to some of you because I don't think that they advertise it regularly. If you go into the LinkedIn phone app version and you press the search bar at the top, there's a little 4-square button. I know it's a little bit small on the screen here, but if you press it there, that's where you can get access to your QR code, and where you can scan other people's QR codes. I find with this, now that QR codes are used regularly for menus and for art pieces anywhere else, is that you can use your camera to scan it. You don't have to go into the LinkedIn app. And I just take a screenshot of it and put it as my lock screen so that I don't have to do the fumble or anything else when I am interacting with people. And I can just scan and then move on to the next thing or have a quick takeaway.
By the way, like, I think it's also totally cool to just ask someone if they mind if you take a photo of their name badge. Like, that's such an easy way too. Just like, hey, I intend to connect with you or stay connected with you. Any chance I can like just take a photo of your name badge real quick so I don't forget the spelling of your name, right? Can be just an easier way than trying to memorize like, you know, a spelling that you've never seen before, right?
Yeah, or it's a conversation starter for having those different means, or if you don't have that ability, someone doesn't have their phone on them, that you can use that too.
Yeah, there's another Phil Gazaleh, only one other in the world. He lives in Jacksonville, Florida, and he runs a gun store. And he reached out to me once on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, I'm getting a lot of like messages from like queer consultants. I think they're trying to reach you." I was like, "Yeah, they definitely are." Yeah.
And then the next portion is being genuine. So, of course, as we know from the past day and a half, a lot of people have been talking about showing your authentic self. So, how can you showcase this when interacting with people, either one-on-one or in group settings? The first portion is having vested interest. So, by showing vested interest, that might be maintaining eye contact or having undivided attention with that person that you're talking with. If you're anything like me, especially through this pandemic, I get easily distracted and my eyes wander. It's almost like I'm people watching when talking with people. So I have to be mindful and remind myself, hey, how can what I'm doing be perceived? So just try to keep that at top of mind when you're talking with folks, and actively listen to what they're saying to you so that you can tailor your follow-up questions so it doesn't just seem like you're talking for the sake of talking. The conversation is going to go in a direction that's meaningful to both of you because you're wholeheartedly invested in that conversation. You're going to want to be authentically you, so showcasing the parts of your identity that you find relevant to bring up in that time. That might be one part of your intersectional or multidimensional identity. It might be multiple that you want to showcase, but just understanding what fits that moment and what you want to bring up. But at times, this is a very safe space of a conference. It may not always be a safe space. Either someone has microaggressions that they're bringing up, or they're using a word that they maybe shouldn't use in any sort of instance. So if it's a safe or brave space, I recommend either using that as a learning moment with that person so that you're not creating the bystander effect. If you're not comfortable with doing that, or that's it doesn't feel like it's a safe space to bring that up as a learning moment, you can either bring it up to the organizers or someone else that might be able to know, hey, we don't tolerate this. How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again in these types of spaces? The next area is being focused. So when I look at being focused, it's about being able to zero in and zoom out in instances, and it's the real question of quality or quantity. I'm going to talk about both because you're probably at times you might want to activate both of these areas. So with zeroing in is going in with goals in mind. So you might have a small goal, you might have a stretch goal. Like say for instance, yesterday I might have been like, I want to talk to the president of Microsoft Canada. Might be a stretch goal, might not have had availability to talk, but in general, if it's a smaller goal, I might say, I want to talk to someone in Microsoft in general, or someone that's working with desktop computers or applications. So think about how you want to structure your goal. You may want to have that shoot for the moon element, but make sure to not only go for that one or not be discouraged if that specific um, blue skies approach goal wasn't hit. You're also going to want to zoom out when you're looking at it. So don't let your specific goals shut any doors of who you might be wanting to speak to. Talk to other folks that are working in other industries. You don't know who their second degree connections are, as well as speak to folks that have transferable skills, because you never know what skills might be useful to you now. I was just in a design thinking session earlier today. If you're looking at problems from different ways, they might be able to give you different information that can help the problems that you are facing in your workplace, or solutions that you might face in the future. But depending on your networking goal, at times quantity can be the case and it can be a numbers game. So if I had 1,000 roles open, I might want to talk to a lot of people. The hard part about that is you have to build the rapport later. And Phil's going to talk about the trust equation a bit later as well, that can talk about doing it in a short time. But it can be hard to build that rapport in a short amount of time if you're trying to almost be a order taker, or you need to talk to someone sequence in high volume. Or if you're also an entrepreneur or working in sales, there's sayings about there can be X numbers of no's before you get a yes, but you just want to get that word out there. The next area is being mindful. So for mindfulness in this and what you can be aware of, the first one is time. So when you're being mindful of time, at times either people are only going to have a time-bound experience, like a amount of minutes that they might have available of what they can talk to you about. Like, I'm leading the session now. I have a block or a hard stop of when I can't talk to you during this period. Or it might be the attention span sort of element, as we have some of us might have experienced this exit line of I need to go to the washroom, or like that sort of soft exit of finding a way out of a conversation. In those, use your EQ or your emotional intelligence to look at those verbal and nonverbal cues that people are giving. And I'll talk a little bit more about when you're going to want to how that can be an advantage for you. You're also going to want to be appropriate. So read the room, be respectful when you are talking to different people, and make sure to be as inclusive as you can through your actions. So for instance, I know we have a lot of pronoun pins here. I have a pin on, it's part of our stickers. You might want to use gender neutral pronouns when speaking about someone until you 1000% know, because someone can be male presenting or female presenting, but you don't know what pronouns they use. And then also just taking that even further and using other inclusive language that can be a part of people's intersectional identity, like not using terms that can go against mental health, like saying that's crazy, or another gender term of saying, hey guys, to a room of gender diverse people. You're also going to want to have balance in your conversation. So be mindful of how much you're talking and the other person's talking, or other people are talking in these instances. You want to be able to ensure that you're giving space to these different folks for chatting. If you're dominating the conversation, sometimes I'm an extrovert, I'm talking a lot. I'm talking a lot now in this too. Don't worry, Phil's going to be talking too. But just keeping in mind how much you and the other parties are talking, and just give them chances to be a part of that conversation. Like, what do you think, Phil? Um, yeah. To ensure that you're at least giving them that opportunity. They may not want to talk, they may want to just absorb in the conversation, but that you're at least putting that out there so that they feel included in those opportunities. And then the last one is reasoning. So think about why that person's there and what's in it for them. You may want to speak your truth or speak about yourself, but that if it's not a formal networking session, someone might not be looking to network at that time. They might be they might be walking their dog and you walked by them, or any sort of instance where it may be more inconvenient for them, or their cup might be full on a networking front. And finally, be mindful to yourself. So at times you're not going to say your whole piece that you want to. In a networking instance, you might have only had a brief moment. Don't beat yourself up. We can only do so much. And as I said earlier, nobody's perfect. So the fact that you're putting yourself out there for networking instances is enough. If your capacity is full for networking at a certain time, don't beat yourself up again about that moment, because that may wax and wane throughout your life. And you're also going to want to be able to be memorable in any instance that you're chatting with people. So with being memorable, you're going to want to amplify resonance. So when I say that, is that you want to be able to resonate with them in a way that matters, because impressions can mean a lot. So lean into your uniqueness. Are you bold? Are you charismatic? Are you someone that is really passionate about R&D in a specific area? Or like me, I like saying dad jokes, so I might throw in dad jokes in how I'm talking, to let the conversation volley in a certain way. You're going to want to make it count, because as we know from these booking 10 minutes, you might be able to only get so much said in a specific conversation. So prioritize the questions that you want to talk about, and keep your outlook positive or solution oriented, because even if there's an obstacle or there's something that you won't be able to engage, like if you find that it's hindering, we all know that there's hardships in being intersectional and marginalized people. How can you solution orient this, and sort of find that affinity there? Um, and half the battle is leave them yearning for more. So knowing when to exit a conversation, because you want to be able to you don't want to feel like you've talked about every topic that you can talk about. You want to keep more topics about what you can talk to later. And another question is, can we overshare? So I want to say sometimes, and I'm putting overshare in quotes, because I'll give an example. Is I have stretched and relaxed stomach muscles and an enlarged liver from having something called parvovirus when I was in utero. I might want to share that with certain people if I'm talking about adapting elements in work. For me, it doesn't typically affect too much of me in a business work setting, but it can affect me more in workouts that I'm doing, physical activity. So just I might want to chat with people about that or share that part of my identity in that moment. But that to me, even at times, even though it's part of my identity, I can feel like I'm oversharing it, and it's not something that I talk about too often with people because it may not be applicable in that certain scenario. And then we look at the concepts of social currency versus being a peacock or peacocking. So social currency is a marketing technique, and it's what is the perceived value of what you're talking about with other people, and is that going to in turn have any sort of positive behaviors that they're going to do. So if I talk about how I just shared about that moment with me, does someone else know someone else in their life that they're going to want to talk about that with, or where I might be able to empathize with them on that specific point on? Or is there a specific element like me working at Ubisoft and you knowing someone that's really interested in games? Is that going to be something that's going to make you want to act on this information that you know? And then on the flip side, there's being a peacock or peacocking, and that is when you can be sort of seen as showy or excessive when you're making a proud display of oneself, and that's not proud in the term of Pride Month or Pride season that we might have in different areas. It's really on that sort of vanity side, but don't let that hinder you from being able to make that sales pitch or wearing a statement piece or statement item. I'm wearing a dangly pearl earring today. That it's Don't let it hinder you from those, but think about if you're ever being showy or can be perceived as showy, because you want to resonate well with different
And
folks.
just like, I don't know, like I feel like the LinkedIn comparison to that is like posting about a new job you're excited about. Like that's fine, that's great. Like you should do that. Posting about all the other jobs that you got to turn down or all the other offers you got to turn down, like that's maybe a little peacocking, right? I'm sure you've all seen examples of like, yeah, going a little over that line.
And then my last area is being nurturing. So with being nurturing, you're going to want to think about what are those concrete actions in the moment when you're networking and what's ongoing. So for in the moment, how and why are you going to stay in touch with this person? So what's in it for them, and do you have a concrete either timeline or second action that you're going to have? So am I going to email you next week? Are we going to connect because we've connected on LinkedIn? Are we going to have a follow-up connection? And it's great if you can have even a time bound element to that. Like when I'm chatting with people on LinkedIn, I'm like, I'll see if I can get you a response within the next week or so, just so that they know I have a timeline. I mean, I have capacity to get to them right away, but that if I can show, like if they're just curious about an informational interview, I might want to talk with them at that point and show, hey, I have availability then. And it allows for them um, it holds you accountable in those moments. For ongoing, networking is never a one and done experience. So you're going to want to nurture the different relationships that you have. You're going to want to see how you can activate your first degree connections and why you're going to want to talk to them. You never know if you can be a referral for a different job or who they might know in their networks. Just make sure to have tailored responses when you are speaking with folks and that you know what's in it for them. You might also want to keep top of mind, I say passively or indirectly. So if you're both on LinkedIn together or you're on a different sort of application, you just want to post specific content that you have or reacting with certain content because they might know what you have an affinity with or just what you've been doing lately. So if you finished a big art piece or a big project, that they can know that that's happening because then that creates more either social currency that you can talk about or just that can keep the conversation going as well. In networking, remember that there may be losses at times, but that there will be wins. So for losses, someone, as I said, someone might not have capacity to network more in that time in their life, or they might since they might not be able to network at that time per se, or if you're trying to go for a role and you met a recruiter like myself and you weren't a fit for that role at that time, it doesn't mean that you won't be a fit for that role in the future or take any sort of opportunity as a learning opportunity. And remember that your needs will evolve. So if you're not looking to network proactively right now, you might be proactively looking to network later. And just keep that in mind, because or who might not be a decision maker at this point might be a decision maker later. So you never know how you can leverage these different folks and where your needs will go to. I'm going to pass it off to Phil for your portion.
Amazing. Okay, listen, my slides are not as pretty as the Ubisoft ones you've been looking at, but they are structured because that's what consultants do. Folks, I offer you one framework today to think about infusing trust into your networking. But before I show it, I just want to hear from you. What are some of the things, if you think about the people you trust the most, maybe in a professional setting, what are the aspects of your relationship with them that make it so trusting? Just like shout it out. I'd love to hear from you. Any ideas? Show vulnerability. Love it. Any other? Not being judgmental. Love it. There's like an openness. Yeah. Not in sales. Shots fired. Okay. Yeah. Any others? Affirming and supportive. I love that. Yeah. Thank you. Looking out for one another. Walk the talk. Okay. I love this. Yeah. Go ahead. A mutual interest. Love this. Okay. You've basically read my slide to me already. So this is wonderful. Why don't I show you when I think about trust, and again, like I work in a firm that is essentially, you are constantly networking, right? You are networking to get on projects, you are networking to meet new clients, right? You're always networking. And so this trust equation is something that we use just like think about how are we approaching the relationships in our network, right? There's 4 aspects to it. I'll explain it in a little bit. Credibility, reliability, openness, or intimacy, and self-orientation, right? And so I think we talked about many of these, but maybe not all. So the first is credibility, right? So like, do you even have a reason to be reaching out? Do you have like something you're passionate about? Do you have like an expertise that you bring that'll get folks like excited to engage with you, right? Then there's reliability, right? Which is kind of how you show up, your professional conduct. Yeah, it's some of the EQ stuff that we were talking about earlier, but it's also just like, are you on time? You know, if you say you're going to show up, do you show up? Are you going to overstay the welcome, right? Openness, everything that we kind of mentioned here. Are you approaching things from like a non-judgmental way, right? Are you being affirming and supportive of other people? Are you showing vulnerability? All of that fits in there. And the last part is self-orientation. That honestly the trickiest part. And any math people know that because it's in the denominator, it has a disproportionate effect on this equation, right? If your self-orientation is 0, the equation doesn't work, right? Because people are going to be suspicious. Like, why are you so selfless that you would like, I'll reach out to me without making your intentions clear. Conversely, if your self-orientation is too high, you know, it really does affect the way things work. And so I wanted to offer, you see some experiences here of like what goes into each one. What I might encourage you to do after you leave here today, you don't have to do it right now, but think about this equation. Think about the 4 dimensions. Think about the ones that you feel you bring the most to the relationships around you. And then think about the ones where, you know, it just doesn't come as naturally to you, and think about how you can enhance it through some of the actions that you see on this page. Yeah, take a photo. It's all good. But I did want to share, listen, I get a lot of LinkedIn messages. I get about 12 to 20 a day on average of folks reaching out looking for help, right? Which is awesome. I encourage it. I hope each of you sends me a message. I will not reply within a week. I promise you that, but I will get back to you eventually. And I just wanted to like take this lens of self-orientation and look at a few examples. Now, I have to admit, there was a version of this page earlier that like I kind of excoriated people for, you know, copy pasting the wrong name of a firm in an email and like all that kind of, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I just want to really focus in on having higher versus lower self-orientation. So on the left-hand side, right, you can just see a really short message I got that was, the gist of it is like, help me, right? You're going to help me, right? Make time to help me. Which, like, listen, I get it. I'm sure this person reached out to dozens, if not hundreds of people, and was really aiming for that quantity over quality. My response to them was, listen, very, excited to hear about your interest in learning more about my journey and my firm. I can't make time for every individual, so here are some resources you can look at. Right? That's frankly, that's the response that I give to something that's a little, or that's very self-oriented. In the middle, you kind of see like, well, they're trying to make the connection, right? So please, it still helped me, but it's helped me, and also we went to the same school, right? Which is nice, like great. So you're starting to open it up. You're starting to show that, hey, there's a reason I'm reaching out to you. It's because I feel like you're one of the people in this forum that I'm the most comfortable approaching because we have a similar background. Didn't really spell it out that way, but I can read between the lines. And this person, I did make time for. And but the lowest self-orientation on the right-hand side, this is someone who is very explicit, right? This is what I'm trying to achieve. There's a reason I think you can help me because you were able to take the degree that we have in common and translate it into a career that I aspire to. Can you please make time because you have a unique position that I can learn from, right? And anyway, I just wanted to offer this as a bit of a sample of the range. And when you think about whether it's written and you're reaching out to folks on LinkedIn or whether it's networking in person, you always want to have your agenda really clear, right? Wow, you work in entertainment. I find that so interesting. I've always thought about a career in entertainment. What do you like the most about it, right? That's great. But if you just walk up to someone, you zero in on their name tag, and you're like, Ubisoft, are you hiring? Right? Like it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. Cool. The second thing I want to leave you with is, has anyone run for office here? Or like know anyone who's run for office?
The student council start?
Sure, student council. We can start there. But okay, but if you run for like a major political party, there's one thing they make you do before anything else, and that is you have to make a list of every single person that you know. You have to list out the hundreds, hopefully thousands of people that you know, even at a very surface level, who you could reach out to and ask for help, right? This is a fantastic exercise. Like, I encourage you all to think about doing maybe not like the 1,000-person version of it, but the reason it's so important for political candidates is you have different levels of ask, and in that pool of 1,000 people, different folks are going to be able to show up for you in different ways, right? So if you're running for office, like, some people you need a donation, right? Even a $20 donation, that's fantastic because that puts like 2 lawn signs out, and you're really happy with that. Then there's people who know other people, right? And might just like have a conversation with them and convince them to maybe vote for you or register as a volunteer or something like that. Then you have the people who are willing to give you their time, and then you have all the way up to people who are willing to like fully activate their network for you in a way that like would make a difference in a campaign. Likewise, on the professional networking front, there's people. I'm sure if everyone's got a few hundred folks at least on LinkedIn, or maybe you're getting there. Folks are going to like land somewhere on that list. There's people there who are maybe have an insight for you. People there who might have a connection that can help you. There's people who might be willing to sit down and have a half-hour conversation, just talk about what are the different directions you could take your career from here, given where you've gotten it so far, right? So I run this exercise with junior partners at McKinsey, because I told you it's a very like internally network heavy place. So what you do is you take a sheet of paper. If you have a notebook, I encourage you to do this like kind of as we're talking. It's a good exercise. Just write me in a circle in the middle. Think about all the people who are in your network who can like help you along who can be most important to advancing your professional aspirations. And depending on how close you feel in a relationship to them, put them in triangles that are either close or far from that me circle in the middle. Then draw a line between the triangle and circle, and the thickness of the line should indicate the amount of trust that you have in that relationship, right? Because you can be close with some people, you work with them every day, but you don't really trust them. So that would be like, I don't know, maybe TV on here, versus some people who like you don't really interact with that much, you don't have that close a relationship, but like you just on a visceral level, like you really feel like you're getting a lot of their trust and attention. And the last thing you do is you put arrows to just indicate like the direction of travel. Who's getting more out of that relationship? Are you getting more out of it, or is the other person getting more out of it? And often what you'll find is early in your career, right, most of the arrows are pointing in. And what you find is like as you kind of mature through your career, you end up realizing that a lot of the arrows have kind of flipped the other way, right? And in that same respect, what I'd love you to do is once you have this map established and written down, you're going to start realizing there are some people missing from that page, right? There's some folks who could be really helpful to me that I don't really consider to have to be in a proxim relationship to, right? And so what you might end up doing is identifying these are like the 5 or 10 people who could be really instrumental in helping me take that next step in my career or grow my network in a way I'm really interested in doing. And get me there if only I were to make that connection. Then you have your like target list, right? Like these are the people you need to go and try to establish a relationship with. You'll also realize that there's some people here who like, hey, NN in the top right, that's someone that I want to bring in, right? I'm going to invest in bringing that relationship in. Or I don't know, GL is someone who, I get a lot from, but I really want to start giving back, and maybe I'm going to start approaching that relationship from more of a like maybe with more quality in mind of outcomes, right? What can I do for you versus just like always asking. So anyway, really, really helpful exercise. Really encourage you to do it, especially if you it doesn't take long to do. And it just gives you like a really good idea of where to go. The folks I've seen who've done this like the most successfully end up like redrawing it every few months, and that's like how they check in with themselves of like, wait a second, am I keeping this network up to date? I shared this last night. I met up with an old friend who unfortunately was made redundant recently, and and he was talking about how it was exactly as you said earlier. Like he just deeply regretted waiting until the moment he needed to activate his network to invest in it, right? And frankly, he's at a bit. He has a steep hill to climb because of it. He hasn't really reached out to anyone since pre-pandemic. 2.5 years has gone by, and now he's trying to reestablish these connections and also land some gainful employment because he has some real serious needs to get there. We talked about this exercise, and he said like I'm committed to doing this now at least every 6 months, no matter whether I'm looking for work or happy where I am, right? So just something to keep in mind framework wise. Did both those land, like trust equation and then like mapping out your network? Cool. Seeing some nods, feeling good about that. Um, if we go, yeah, I think I covered this already. Yeah, we're good. Okay, thank you. So then, I think we're at the point now where with about 15 minutes left, it'd be great to just kind of hear from you. What are some of the questions that are top of mind for networking? It can be anything from like, let's talk micro, should I say this or that? I'm very happy to answer those kinds of questions. But also just like strategy-wise, how do I even think about establishing or getting things going if I'm starting from scratch or from early in my networking journey? I think we're very happy to kind of guide you on the way. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, you're running with a mic. Here.
Yeah, so I feel like one of the biggest barriers for me to network at
Yeah.
events like this is that sometimes you walk up to like a group and like it's kind of intimidating. They could be in the middle of a conversation. Maybe they're in a field that doesn't really conform to what I'm in. So how would you like break that barrier of finding like the correct time to make someone feel comfortable and just not walk up to someone cold?
Listen, like the walk-up's totally fine, especially in like an environment like this where like, I mean, you're expecting folks to walk up. I would say, first of all, there are great groups and there are like not so great groups. Like a great group will like recognize someone went out of their way to walk up. Like they really put themselves out there and they'll say, hey, great for you to join. We were just talking about XYZ, right? And then they'll bring you into the fold. Other groups you're going to join and they're not going to do that, and that is not on you. Like don't take on the personal responsibility of like every single other person's behavior. That said, when you do join a group, like just show some openness and curiosity, right? Like ask some questions, try to find an appropriate time to throw your 2 cents in, or yeah, ask a question that you have. What I wouldn't do is like try to throw a conversation off, right? So if everyone's going on about like, yeah, I don't know, Twitter's takeover and their blue check marks, don't be like, haha, that's great. Has anyone heard about like how the Leafs are doing today? I don't know. That's a bad example. I just walked through the Scotiabank Arena for the first time ever, and I was like, whoa. So yeah, I just keep it on topic. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oof. Yeah, go on.
Hi, Jasmine Wong, and I work at TELUS. I was really interested in your concept of peacocking. And, like a lot of these seminars that you go to, people talk a lot about, exhibiting your personal brand and having your elevator pitch. So, where's the line that you guys find between, being out there and open and kind of landing a mark for yourself versus being too showy?
Mhm.
Because I
Uh,
think it's so subjective. I don't know.
yeah, yes, it definitely can be subjective. And that's something I'd say is almost like when you're practicing for a stand-up show, or there's an example I had in one of my slides is doing like the yes and sort of response. So with that, you might need to have quote unquote practice groups that you're talking with and see where their threshold is, because in sales at times there can be the hard sell, but you don't want to go too far. So you might want to almost have a crescendo of what you're saying if it goes up to a hard sell, to test the waters with that group, and also getting your opinion from people that in your circles to get their gauge on, hey, does this seem too showy, or does this seem authentic of who I am and what you think my personal brand is too, because that can speak volumes, and they will be able to give you that feedback very earnestly too. That could help you understand where that hard line is, because it's definitely a gray area. I don't have the perfect understanding of it per se, and I just say it's mainly the muscle memory. And Phil, I don't know if there's anything you have.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I notice when in like a group networking setting, folks are taking up more space than they should, right? Um, often with students, right? So often, like, I mean, MBA students are like another breed. Sorry, any MBAs in the world. Um, but you're in like a group of 6 people, and like there's always that one who's just like gotta like tell you 7 things about themselves that like they practiced beforehand without creating enough space for anyone else to get a word in. And like you take note of that, and you're like, well, maybe that's not the highest EQ. What I will say though is um, communicating your personal brand should be a conversation, not a presentation, right? And so if someone's giving you cues that like they are showing interest in like learning more about you, then yeah, keep going, share more, go further down the rabbit hole, like share more and more and more about yourself. If they're not, just keep it at that surface level pitch and have a pleasant conversation, and you can move on. As you said, it's gonna be a lot of losses in networking. There's gonna be some wins. Yeah.
Thank you.
You are getting your exercise. Great.
Yeah.
So much. Thank you. Um, Full disclosure, I went to Carleton, so hopefully I didn't break the trust in question.
All good.
I just have one question about towards the end. You mentioned a two-way relationship. Do you have any tips for someone who has benefited tremendously from someone when they first enter their career, and the relationship has always been one way, but a couple years down the road, I'm looking for ways to give back, but like other than just buying this person Lego set, like what can I do? Like for like a senior developer that have been mentoring me for like 3 years, for example.
Yep. In my point of view, for that, you may aspire to have that two-way relationship, but in certain times it may only go one way. That person, because they've been mentoring you or being able to share that information that they have from their wisdom, you never know from that one-way relationship, if you're also posing elements of when you want to share your knowledge with that person, they might be able to activate their network of saying, hey, I actually know other junior people or people that are now the junior next cohort, where then you can provide that knowledge, and it can help you exercise being that mentor for someone there. It might be someone in their network, or they might be able to give you that opportunity where both of you can speak together.
Yeah, and I listen. I don't discount the fact that they may need your help down the road one day, right? Like my first ever consulting manager recently was like swung back into town. He's left the firm for a while now, and we ran through like a mock interview for a CEO interview he has this week. So like I didn't expect him to reach out to me for that, but I was very happy to do it. And then maybe like not everyone's gonna like have a CEO interview tomorrow. I get that. So maybe like another thought for you is just um, letting letting someone know the impact that their guidance or mentorship has had on you is in a way turning that one-way arrow at least a little bit the other way, because you start to they are getting something out of it. If you just leave it at like end of conversation and then you end up landing a role in that industry and you never reach back out and like think like that, you know, you're missing an opportunity there for sure.
Mhm. And just one other point on that is you may want to show what they're instilling with you, where that's gone for you, and how you're applying it, because then that can show either your gratitude or where you're going in it as well. That then they can know, hey, you're someone in their network that they may want to tap for someone else too. Any other questions? Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, like, I think we sort of dug into like mentorship a little here, but potentially growing out of your mentors, or like their advice to you, you're like, okay, I get that. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, can you grow out of your mentors? Is it possible? Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely possible. And the one takeaway that I'll have to sort of say with this, what we might go over this before, but let me just see if I can go back, is to critically think in those areas. So if you're going out of that, you may want to have a hard truth or radical candor in that scenario of what you can bring up with them, saying, hey, you changed that relationship because of your transparency and that vulnerability that you're giving with them about, rather than being a mentor, they're now uh, you're either both at that same level and you want to change the dynamics of the relationship, but no one's telepathic. So no one, unfortunately, I wish when I was a kid, pretending I was in X-Men, that no one's going to know unless if you let them know, because they'll just think if you don't say anything about it, or you do the nod, or your nonverbal cues are sort of coming in, like maybe you're not reaching out to them as much for that advice. If you don't put it out there, they're never going to know.
Like there's a little like watch out in my head of like, if you're taking advice from a mentor who thinks they have like exclusive rights to give you advice and guide your life, like I would rethink that relationship. Hopefully a mentor sees themselves as just being one thoughtful input for you to make decisions. And I think you should be totally free to discount that as much as you want, right? You know, again, consulting, like I am working a firm of people who give advice for a living. So it should be no surprise that all of my like mentors are always really happy to tell me exactly what they think I should do in my career next, right? And some of them I just have to like politely say, okay, great, that's an awesome idea. I think I'm more excited about this, and you know I've been having conversations about that and that, but I really appreciate you like sharing that thought with me. That's a totally okay thing to do. I wouldn't like kick them out of your mentor network though. It's like one bad idea. Maybe if it's like a trend, but like, yeah.
My question is on a similar line. How do you cultivate and choose the right mentors?
I like to think that comes down to values mostly, right? So when I think about the mentors that I've connected with the most, it's always people who at the end of the day have like an equal appreciation for the importance of like equality and justice, which are two of my like most important values, personal values. And the ones who I've had less successful relationships with just haven't regarded them as much. So the way I got there though is by first getting to know them at like a surface level, starting to connect a little bit more beyond like the immediate work thing that we were doing and realizing we had that connection, and then very naturally evolving into like, hey, we don't really work together anymore, but we both have a lot to teach each other still. And so it kind of naturally evolved from there.
Mm-hmm. And to build on that a bit further is I think the trust equation can help a lot in that. I deal with the trust equation a lot. I do lots of screenings and lots of elements that if someone is comfortable talking with you, sometimes they may end up revealing the red flags unknowingly to themselves because they're comfortable talking with you. So when you know that, that's when you understand those shared values. And if you're building that trust can be in a good sense. It can also be they trust you and now they're going to say something that then you know, oh, okay, this might not be the type of network or type of connection I thought it was, and you may want to activate it differently then, or know, hey, I need to use this as a learning moment with that person, or it might be more personal than a professional connection too. Any other questions?
How many people do you think you can based on the time you have in a week, actually have in a network? Like, if you think of it from a roster perspective, and the sort of framework that you had on the screen, like, there's only so many people you can have time for, I guess, in the time span of like a week, a month, a year. Like, have you thought about that?
I mean, again, I'm coming from a perspective of someone whose job it is to give people advice on networks. So take this with a grain of salt. I put an hour and a half aside every week to chat with people who've reached out to me. So they're usually trying to network up. And I spend about 3 hours of my week speaking with peers and potential clients and stuff like that. So networking out. Yeah. But I think that's very high. So don't benchmark to me. I think it's going to vary by person, but also like, as JP was saying, networking isn't just time in your calendar between 9 and 5, right? Like I play in, I don't know, the queer curling league. Anyone else? No, I don't recognize any rotators here. Okay. And like, you sit down for a beer afterwards and you end up having a chat with someone and you realize like, oh, wait a sec, we like both know that thing. And like, oh, we could use help doing that and let's chat, right? So don't only think of it as like you have to schedule time or you have to have like an Excel list of contacts and you're gonna like systematically tick down them. Although that can be helpful, honestly. Like don't discount that. I would think, setting some time aside during the work week, great, but also think about how you can spend time outside of work, also forging networks. Yeah.
And it also just depends on what the scope and size of your exposure can potentially be. With working in consulting or I'm in recruitment, I'm doing screening calls regularly. So that's already technically building my network. It's my role to build my network and to screen people or talk to people. But some people are in data crunching roles. They're in roles where it's a very individual in what they're focused on rather than communications focused. So I'd say it depends on how much you're exposing. For me, when I'm doing screening calls, I just want to have a good impression when I'm talking to them, because if they're a fit for the role, if they're not a fit for a role, I'm representing the company. And also, I don't know, they might not be a fit for that position, but they could be a fit for something else. Or we might be able to talk about a topic. I'm also a co-lead for an ERG. We might be able to talk about something else that can either connect us for a role I'm in now, a position that person's in later, that then we might want to activate it at that point. Yeah, and I think we have time for one last question.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to ask a question more about recruiters themselves.
Mhm.
So in a lot of careers, you find that people in similar positions have similar, skill sets. And I feel like when it comes to recruiters, it's kind of harder to pinpoint what they all have in common. Would you yourself, Jonathan, I think this is more for you, say that there is this one kind of North Star for each of them, that commonality? Because I think that could give us insight into how we should conduct ourselves networking.
I don't, for the commonality thing, there can be value connections, but if you're looking only at like a skills or experience connection, that's limiting yourself from looking at people that have transferable skills. Myself studying a different area for my undergrad and my postgrad, I always had to think about what were my transferable skills, because you don't want to feel like you're proving yourself from what you're talking about. So as from a recruiter's point of view, it's removing any sort of unconscious biases I have to make sure I'm open to that experience, and I'm allowing the hiring managers to be open to that just as much. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And I think we're almost at time now, but I'll be around. If you have any questions, you can connect with both of us on LinkedIn. And thanks for being in our recruitment, our networking session today.